Alrighty, my friends, welcome back to our next video in this week's segment. So we've talked about the smaller little nuggets of plankton, kind of tried to start on the smaller side, more simpler side, and now for our next video in this session, we're going to talk about some of our bigger plankton that are out there. And these ones are kind of fun. And ones that perhaps you have heard of, at least in some way, shape, form, or another in your life. And these little guys are called zooplankton. So what's kind of cool with zooplankton is there's kind of two main categories. But zooplankton in and of themselves, they are actually heterotrophs. So unlike phytoplankton, who are autotrophs, who can make their own food, zooplankton are heterotrophs. They have to actively consume other things. And then there's two categories. One are holoplankton, which means they live their entire lives as a little plankton. And the next are meroplankton, so they only live part of their lives as plankton. So this is where many eggs, larval, and juvenile stages of many organisms that spend the rest of their lives as free swimmers or bottom dwellers start as meroplankton. So the baby stages, little baby stages start as meroplankton. Zooplankton can exist in patches of really high population density, which can then attract larger predators. But of course, they can also exist in less populated spaces to hopefully help preserve their stocks. This is also, by the way, one of the reasons why some fish will, or a lot of fish will give birth to or will lay hundreds to maybe even thousands of eggs because, you know, the chances of being eaten are are quite large. So they, in order for their species to survive, they've evolved to producing a lot of eggs or producing a lot of babies because just the likelihood of a lot of them dying is pretty high. So this here is looking at zooplankton density accumulation. Over here on the right hand side. So let's focus our eyes over on this this graphic here. So I know there's a lot going on, so I'm going to make an attempt at kind of breaking down what it means. So each individual panel is an individual month's worth of data for 200 meters. So starting with January at the top and December at the bottom. And the red color indicates a larger concentration of zooplankton, and the cooler colors, or blue, indicate a lower concentration of zooplankton. So, and then the x-axis is time, with midnight on the left and midnight on the right. So you're going through a 24-hour period with 12 noon in the middle. So I encourage you to pause the video and see what sort of patterns are sticking out to you. Kind of what time of day do you see more red? What time of day do you see less red? Is there months or time of year where there's seemingly a greater accumulation for a longer time of the day? Or, you know, whatever other patterns come to light. So I encourage you, give the video a pause and see what you see. Hopefully you pause the video to see what you see, but some things that really point out to me, and something, you know, that just like a large pattern anyway, is kind of see how it almost looks like a little vase if you were to kind of like draw like where you see the really distinct variation, which tells me that during the daytime, there's a lesser concentration of zooplankton at the surface. Whereas at night, zooplankton are like, all right, time to go up to the top. Generally, and most likely because there's probably less predators at the surface at night. And so they're able to come out in droves and potentially eat some of the detritus or nutrients that are at the surface. Whereas during the daytime, maybe there's more predators around. or, you know, what have you, kind of hard to really say. But what I also want to point out is kind of even like in the spring and summertime, there's a greater concentration than in the winter time. Maybe because there's more sunlight, and so the zooplankton that do stick around at the surface are like, oh look, sun, I love this. Let me eat the things that are like taking in sunlight, and being more abundant during that time. So kind of really interesting, I think. So I encourage you to take another look at that if you didn't see those things. Now going into some different examples of zooplankton. So zooplankton tend to be the most well-studied and have widespread types worldwide, which are small crustaceans, which you may know as shrimps, copepods, and euphisids. And the common name for euphisids are krill. So these types of zooplankton are herbivorous, and they can eat half of their body weight in each day, which is pretty wild. And then krill are the base of the food chain for many baleen whales. Baleen whales. So those are our friends like the humpback, the gray whale, blue whale, because we'll talk further about this later, but they're basically the ones that filter feed. Think about the movie Finding Nemo, right? Where in the scenes where they get swallowed up by the whale and they're speaking whale, whatever, that's a baleen whale. So what's fascinating is you can see that the shrimp here is red, or excuse me, the krill here is red. So scientists are learning more and more that a lot of the poo color of these larger baleen whales are also red, because a lot of what they eat is red. So it makes sense that their poo is also red. The next we have foraminifera and radiolarians. These are, both of these types are microscopic and single-celled amoeba-like protozoans. These feed primarily on phytoplankton, but some can also eat small zooplankton, and these tend to be found in warmer waters. If you look at the sketches over here, these look like the most terrifying, I think, of all of the types of plankton that we've looked at, simply because they look really spiky, right? It looks like a little spiky torture device or something like that. So really just quite weird looking and scary looking, frankly. Like Hellraiser, if you've seen that movie, kind of looks like that. Next we have pteropods. So these things are so cute. These are mollusks, that are related to snails and slugs. And they have this little foot sort of thing that's modified into a transparent and gracefully undulating sort of wing, so that can go kind of back and forth to make it look like they're kind of almost dancing through the water. These give me kind of the vibe of, elephants, or like Dumbo, right? Because you get the Dumbo, the elephant ears and the elephant trunk. So that's just kind of the vibe I get from this photo, or this sketch, I should say. Next up we have ctenophores. So these are transparent, gelatinous, and bioluminescent jellyfish-like creatures. They're actually not a type of jellyfish. These tend to float near the surface, and these are actually carnivores that feed on other zooplankton. Some of them can have these little tentacles that come down that can catch anything in the water and bring it up into their mouth. A lot of them are also bioluminescent. If you're watching this in spring 2024, I shared a video from the Monterey Bay Aquarium where they have a couple of ctenophore creatures there that have the bioluminescence. Like, you can actually see the rainbow kind of coming down their body, and it's really, really, really cool. So if you have not been to the Monterey Bay Aquarium, I highly recommend. Speaking of jellyfish, these are actually a completely different type of animal according to your textbook. These are not necessarily a type of zooplankton, but they are actually colonial type creatures. And some can actually gather food and reproduce or protect a colony with stinging cells. Others can form a float, like the Portuguese man-o'-war or a valeia. And then jellyfish themselves kind of look a bit like this. So these are all kind of jellyfish-like sort of organisms. Pretty neat. And this spring, we've actually seen a huge influx of valleias along the coastlines. They're also known as by-the-wind sailors. And they're very, very, very small, and they won't sting you like Portuguese man o' war, which is supposed to be one of the most painful stings to man. So just to hone in on this idea of the difference between holoplankton and meroplankton, there's a couple of examples here. So the ones here on the left are holoplankton, where they spend their entire lives as zooplankton. Cute little things here, right? These are little microscopic, some of them microscopic, this one's a little bit more macro, but they spend their whole life as a small little creature, whereas the sketches over here on the right-hand side, those are meroplankton. And if you pause the video and look at the descriptions for each one, you can see kind of the baby version and then think of what the larger version would be. Honestly, these things look like freaking aliens to me. So kind of wild, I think, to imagine that the animals that we know in their adult form start out as these little nuggets here. Right, so I encourage you to give the video a pause a few seconds ago and kind of take a closer look at those, or use your book and have a closer look. But for the next video, we're going to jump into this idea of production. So I encourage you to, before you start that video, which again, by the way, started about 3 to 4 minutes in, I'll have it start to set that way, but you don't have to reverse back. Think of the word productivity. What does that word mean to you? What does it mean? In general, doesn't have to necessarily mean in the oceans, but what does that term productivity or productive mean? And then further, what do you think it would mean for the oceans? And why are we talking about this word? Okay, so think of those things, keep those things in mind, and you'll be introduced to that idea in the next video and then in class together. All right, thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'll see y'all on the flippy floppy. Bye.